My name is Mike Wood. I'm co-founder and CEO of a company called MintList. We're operational in BC and Alberta, shortly to be in Ontario. We help consumers buy and sell cars in a more friendly way, and we do it a little differently than everybody else. We haven't gone out there and started a dealership or anything like that. We've just leveraged all the existing dealers that are already there. My background is a long history in the automotive business, so I had lots of connections. That's the one thing, the good thing that comes with age is that you get lots of connections you can leverage. And we built a platform basically holding dealers accountable to provide fair values and transparency to consumers. And we found the best way to do that was for them make them compete for cars from consumers. So if you're going to go trade your car in, you're no longer going dealer to dealer or putting your car up in a, you know, Kijiji or Auto
Mhm.
Trader or whatever it is, and waiting for the ding dong on the door or whatever it may be. Instead, you just take a few photos, answer some questions. We do all the other work, and then you watch as a bunch of dealers compete for your car, and then you have complete transparency on the value. You can say, "Yeah, I'll take it," or "No, I won't." And it really is that simple. So I think when we talk about it, is that we basically take all the ugly bits out of a car buying experience away and let you do those at home from behind a screen where you feel safe, where everyone is kind of on the same level playing field. Um, and people seem to really like it. So that's the story behind Mintless.
And I think it makes a lot of sense. We've seen a lot of industries kind of move towards more digital aspects, or at least having it pretty much put in the consumer's hand, like you were saying, not having to have those random people show up on from Kijiji or Facebook Marketplace, test your car out because that's always an awkward relationship, but also very intimidating. Even though we're so used to it with Uber and stuff, showing up to your house to make a big, typically very large purchase, um, tends to never be something someone's super excited about. I know all my friends, even people mid to late 30s, are like, I'm gonna get my dad to sell this. I just don't want to deal with this. I don't know how to talk about cars. It's such a negative experience for most, it seems. So obviously, like you said, have some experience with dealerships. What made you kind of step away? I guess not focus on business or individual to individual selling, because that always seems to be the first thing people think of. Like, hey, I need to make a marketplace. There's a lot of people out there. Let's just focus on the people. What made you kind of focus? Hey, what we want to focus more on the dealership aspect of this? Was it just due to the fact of it's a little bit more security? You had the relationships because B2C always comes first thing to mind, or C2C comes first to mind.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question because for us, we looked at it and we wanted to make sure that this could be a marketplace where people feel safe.
Hmm.
Because you're 100% right. You nailed it on the head. No one really likes to sell their car online because it is a large ticket item,
Hmm.
and personal safety is definitely, there's some risk there. There's financial risk. There's a lot of fake bank drafts out there that float around. I mean, as a dealership, I had a guy steal a car from us once by signing all the paperwork and handing us fraudulent payment. I had another guy that came in and did all the financing work with us, but the guy that said he wasn't who he was. And I only found out about that from the Montreal Police Department that called me because
Wow.
they found our car in a raid, and the guy had never even transferred the insurance over or the title. So,
Hmm.
you know, and we looked at it and looked at it and looked at it and said, on the peer to peer, the consumer to consumer, we don't have a way to eliminate that fraud.
Hmm.
Like there's fraud on eBay, there's fraud on Auto Trader, there's fraud on Craigslist, and the fraud exists there because those marketplaces are marketplaces.
Hmm.
They're not specific to saying, "Hey, we're a safe haven."
Hmm.
And the only way we could do it was say, "Okay, we can vet all the dealers that are buying cars, so we know that the checks are good. We know that the consumer experience is going to be good. We know that these people have, tremendous reputations." And dealers accept a certain amount of risk when buying a car anyhow. That's
Hmm.
what they do, right? They buy cars from consumers, they buy cars from other dealers. There's an inherent amount of risk that you take and you kind of bake into your business model. And you have a lot of checks and balances in a dealership that a normal consumer wouldn't have to catch those things. Sometimes you learn from experience.
Hmm.
And so we said, all right, the only way we can make this work is dealer to consumer and
Hmm.
consumer to dealer in order to be able to guarantee a fraud free environment.
Mhm.
And then we went a step further and we got a partnership with Industrial Alliance, the big insurance company, to go ahead and underwrite warranties for us. And underwrite warranties on both sides of the equation. So they underwrite a warranty from a consumer selling their car to a dealer on the powertrain major components.
Mhm.
So for the dealers, they have a level of comfort knowing that if something isn't quite right with that car on the big ticket items, at least that they're covered.
Interesting. And I feel like, one thing you touched on is the fact that consumers might not know a lot about cars, and there is a lot of inherent risk because dealerships are so used to buying and, not, I guess, flipping cars so often. Was was there a concern from that side saying, "Hey, I need to see it in person, or I need to, buying online is too much of a risk," or has the industry become so quick and rapid that they're already, buying cars over the phone, or was that a new transition they had to get used to?
So there's two parts of that equation.
Mhm.
They're used to buying cars that are pre-vetted at auctions all day long.
Mhm.
They're used to cars that come with a condition report, and they used to basically they would drive them through
Yeah.
an auction block, and they would have something called simulcast. And simulcast was basically a camera and the ability to bid online versus all the people that are in the lane buying cars. And these auctions were fast, they're like 30 seconds long. Sometimes they go a minute if the car takes a little bit longer to reach the number, but with a live auctioneer. Um, and so we looked at it and said at the beginning, we need to give the dealers that ability to bid on a car confidently. So we need to have that inspection report. So when I say you take a few photos, you take some very curated photos that we make you walk through in a specific order. And we basically
Mhm.
give you, we send you a text message, or if you're on the
Mhm.
web, it will just go right to the next screen. And it'll basically give you an outline of your exact car as soon as you take a picture of the
Oh, wow.
serial number.
Mhm.
So if you take a serial number picture, we can extrapolate from there that you're driving a Toyota RAV4, and
Mhm.
then we just give you an outline of a Toyota RAV4, and you take these specific photos, you answer some questions, and then we pull in all the data. And we pull in
Mhm.
data from Carfax, we pull in service history, we pull in mechanical repair history, we pull in, pardon me,
Interesting.
accident claims. We also
Mhm.
pull in all the factory options on the car. And for some people, they maybe not don't remember 5 years ago they bought the premium package, right? Or that they have this feature, or they don't have that feature.
Mhm.
So we have that data so that the dealers, when they come online, they can see exactly the condition of the car, right down to the tire tread depth. They can
Oh,
also
wow.
see the features and options and the repair history in the Carfax report. So they have everything they need to be able to make that decision. Versus for dealers, if they go onto Facebook Marketplace, and you get lots of phone calls on Marketplace from dealers. I would say the bulk of the calls you get in the first 2 days when you place your car up for sale are from dealers, and then they have to come out and look at the car, and then they have to arrange payment and do all the things, and it's an arduous process. So we basically bring them 20, 30 cars 3 times a week that they
Mhm.
could sit at from their desk and just click and buy. And it's a much more efficient process for them because they have that degree of comfort that the cars are pre-vetted.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I think one of the challenging things is, like you were saying, is the fact that because of the photos and just at least that level of trust, because there was all this information provided, like you said, you'll never be 100% sure unless, something can always, you buy, everyone knows, you buy something, next day it breaks. That's just how life is. But I think we were saying, but you were saying with, like, there's a level of requirements I have to meet. Like, I need to know these factors. That's all I really need to make the decision, I think. And what was interesting is that you were able to find a way of saying, to get to that minimum, not minimum level, but like a level of comfort that is, it would be great they could try it in person, but that doesn't really add that much more value compared to someone being able to buy online, the ease. So finding that creative balance between the both is always, I think, a challenge every business tries to face, where you're always like, what is needed and what is just nice to have. And I think that's a perfect balance, getting that information to the dealership instead of them having to spend all that time calling those Facebook ads.
And
One.
I think it's also, just real quickly, I think it's also really important for the consumer too, because then they don't have that typical experience where they go in and they start grinding away again on price because, oh, your car needs tires, or your car has this dent that you didn't tell us about,
Yeah.
whatever the story is. The fact is, this is better for both sides of the equation.
Mhm. And did you find kind of starting this business out, was it easier to get the consumer side or the dealership side? Like, or were they quite even? Because every marketplace, you tend to have one that's maybe very easy and one that's a little more challenging. How did you find it in this market?
For us, the first step was to get the dealers.
Mhm,
So we went out there, even before we launched, we had a prototype and we went
mhm.
door to door, dealership to dealership, if you will, and said, hey, if we build this, are you going to use it? And we signed up almost 100 dealers
Oh, wow.
before we wrote a stitch of code. So we really had that. And we gave ourselves a go, no go of in a month,
Mhm,
if we got 20 dealers, we would look at how we were going to build this thing up. We got 25 in that first, actually, in
mhm,
3 weeks. And that really gave us the indication that there was an appetite for it from the dealer side. So dealer acquisition has been, I won't say easy, but relatively um, friction free.
mhm,
And on the consumer side, when you go out there, you have a new product.
mhm,
And this is radically different. And one thing that we've recognized is that, when we're talking to people, they actually say, this sounds too good to be true. And they're
mhm.
skeptical because it is what? I just have to take some photos. I don't even have to type in my mileage because you take that off the photo. And then I'm not paying for this service. It's totally free. Um, what's the catch?
Mhm.
Right? Or is this a scam? There's so many
Yeah.
scams out there. So building that consumer trust, um, I think is probably for us the biggest obstacle.
Mhm,
And just, getting the word out. Now that said, we've got 200 and some odd Google reviews
mhm,
here in Vancouver, which is nice, and they're for the most part completely positive. I say for
mhm.
the most part because there's one that we can't find who that guy is. You know,
Yeah.
you know how you get that one. Uh, but other than that, they're all 100% super positive.
Mhm,
And that lends credence.
mhm,
And we also now are in the position where dealers, when they can't actually come to terms in the showroom on the price of a trade in,
mhm,
have said, why don't you try going to MintList?
mhm,
Put your car up there and watch what happens. And the number that you get there is the number that works across the network. We're a member of the network,
mhm.
so you can come back and buy this car at that number. And
That
that's
is
the
something
ult-
very interesting. Yeah.
yeah. And for us, that's the ultimate validation that this model makes sense.
I think what you just said was really something that resonate with me is the idea that every time you sell anything, and this even getting a job offer, you always wonder, could I have done more? I just bought a house. That's the same thing. Like, could I have offered $5,000 less? They probably would have still said yes, but you always have buyer's remorse because you're like, you can never know because it is big ticket item. There's a lot of external factors, but from dealership side saying, hey, we're a business. We know all these numbers on the back. We know how easy it is to sell, the average time on the showroom floor or on the lot. If you don't trust us, here's like a public bid site. Everyone's bidding on it, and we can be confident we're giving you the best price, or at least takes that fear. Because no matter how much you trust someone, once the numbers start flowing, you think like I always. This is always classic with the house. You're talking to someone, they're like, it's only $50,000 more, but you talk to anyone, you're saying, can you give me 50,000 cash? That's ridiculous. That is so much money. But on big ticket items, a few hundreds tend to fly very easily. Where you'll go to a Winners and argue about a T-shirt that has a stain on it. So I think
That
that's, like you said, such a big thing.
that reminds me of Dan Ariely's book, Predictably Irrational. I don't know if you've
Mhm.
read it,
Yes.
but the example where he had a whole bunch of people and it was a $10 difference on a
Mhm.
$20 pencil, and they said 100 meters down the road at this other store you can buy this $20 pencil for $10 less, and most
Yeah.
people would put the pencil down and they'd watch them walk out the street, and then they did it in a suit store and said,
Mhm.
this $1,000 suit you're looking at 100 meters down the street, it's for $990. And people
Mhm.
looked at him like they were crazy, right? Like, well,
Yeah.
who cares? But the fact of the matter is 100 meters walk worth $10 of your time or not is
Yeah.
still, it's still the same difference, if you will.
Mhm.
But the way the human brain
Mhm.
works is we see it at a relative factor. So you're 100% right.
Yeah. And my mom was so proud. She was telling me a story years ago, like Easter. She's like, when I was at university, I found that eggs were 40 cents cheaper with a 20-minute bus ride away. And then I asked her, that's a lot for 40 cents. She's like, I did it for 1 year till I realized how dumb it was to spend 20 minutes on my time, save 40 cents. But in the moment, you're like, I'm saving money. I'm so smart. Like you said,
Yeah,
everyone's predictably irrational. And it's kind of
yeah,
finding the way of not monetizing, but making a business that utilize that to some extent.
yeah.
So as your users coming on board, they're selling their cars. Do you find that And now this could be very common knowledge or not. For a dealership, is there always a standard price, or will some dealerships pay more for certain cars, or is it a commodity? Are cars a commodity at that level, or is there still some dealerships that maybe pay more for certain cars because they know they can sell them faster? How's that whole business work? Because in my head, it's a car is a car. You should have the same price for everything most of the time.
You'd be there's definitely a price band that they
Yeah.
trade within, and then there's things like condition and all these
Hmm.
variables. But let's say if you had one car that was the same car, it was a
Hmm.
gray whatever it is with
Hmm.
X number of mileage and blah blah blah.
Hmm.
There is always one dealer out there who needs that car more than another dealer.
Interesting.
And that's why the model works, because there is always one dealer that just had one that sold it really, really well and really quickly and thinks, "Oh, I wish I could have another one of those cars."
Hmm.
There's another dealer who has a customer that said, "If you get me this car, I will buy it."
Hmm.
And all you need are those two guys in the same room. And even if you have 100 people in the room and, 99 or 98 of them think it's worth between X and Y, those two guys will take you to Z
Hmm.
to the power of two sometimes.
Oh,
It's
interesting.
it's mind-boggling how it happens, and we watch it. So we have a 30-minute auction format. Uh, you put your car up, and it runs currently three different times in a week. We don't
Hmm.
rerun cars generally unless they just didn't get any attention,
Yeah.
because the cars get stale in the market, and we don't want to over-represent someone's car because it's not fair to them because the market's
Hmm.
just going to keep going down.
Yeah.
It's there's some psychology behind that,
Hmm.
but what'll happen is in the last 2 minutes, all the action will happen.
Hmm.
And if the car comes to the last 30 seconds, if any dealer places a bid, we automatically add another 30 seconds in perpetuity until it runs
Yeah.
out of steam. So sometimes these 30-minute auctions go for an hour and 20 minutes. And it almost feels like a death by 100 cuts
Hmm.
in the last kind of 2 minutes of it because they're
Hmm.
bidding in $100 increments. But you'll watch a car quite often go from $41,000 to 53
Hmm.
and have 191 bids. So it's interesting, and all as I said, all you need
Hmm.
are those two guys that really need that car. Um, Otherwise, they trade in a certain
Yeah.
bracket. But what else that's kind of interesting about what we do is that we have all that data.
Hmm.
We know when the car comes in, and we share this information with the consumers that your car is worth between this and this. We actually have a price comparison engine built that shows you what all the players in the market think your car is worth. And then we extrapolate that against what we think we can get for that car based on our data.
Hmm.
And our data is usually quite positive.
Hmm.
And the reason is that now all those guys that are telling you this is what we think your car is worth have to duke it out.
Yeah. It is very interesting because obviously never worked within a dealership persona or that field at all, but that how a something that could the also seem like commodity, like, hey, this is a X car with 100,000 miles. On average, you'll sell it at this. Like you said, there's always personal factors, whether you have that client who's like, hey, I will pay a premium to get this one mile and one, this exact car because, I grew up driving it and I really want it again. And I know it's an older model. So you never know. And I think really, like you said, having that public auction makes it public. Hey, there's 10 dealers bidding on this. You are going to get the best price, or at least that it's not one person trying to have a fast one on you, kind of go below what you think it's worth. Do you find, and maybe this is even an experience from your working within dealerships previous, do you find a lot of users have a challenge with realizing how much their car is worth because they have so much sentimental value in it, or is that not as big of an issue compared to maybe selling a house where people, I grew my kid, my kids grew up here, I need X amount, thousands or tens of thousands more than realistically there should be.
So I was actually going to draw the similarity between cars and houses.
Okay.
And maybe not that your kids grew up in the car and all that kind of stuff, but everyone always thinks theirs is nicer than the one that just sold down the street. And that guy
Yes.
got, 1,000,009, and
Mhm.
mine's got to be worth 2.2, even though the market's come off 10% in the 7 months since that happened.
Yeah.
But you know how it works. But you do have this, ego involved.
Mhm.
And we play off that side on the dealer side.
Mhm.
So a lot of auctions that are out there, the kind of
Mhm.
incumbents, Dealers don't really know which dealer they're bidding against. It'll just say floor bidder, internet bidder, floor bidder. We show the dealers which dealership they're bidding against. So if I am North Shore Kia and I'm going against West Coast Honda, I know that that's a guy that I compete with, and now I'm duking it out for the car. And it's a real bid versus really dealer one floor bidder. Is it, or is it what we call
Yeah.
straw bids? So we really want to drive that transparency across the market. Now, the consumer, when they're watching it on their phone, because they can watch the auction live, they don't get the ability to see who the dealers are bidding until they accept the deal. So they'll see bidder one, bidder two, bidder five, whatever it is. And then at the end, if they click accept, they get introduced to the dealer. We do the paperwork online, and all they have to do is arrange to have the dealer pick it up or drop it off and exchange it for a check.
And is there a reason that the individual doesn't see which organization is buying it?
Absolutely. Because if they do, I'm not going to get paid.
Oh, I guess that makes sense.
Right?
Yeah.
Because the dealers pay us, not the consumers.
Yeah.
So for the consumer, it's totally free. But, there's got to be a reason for them to do it online with us.
Yeah.
And that's why. That's the only reason why.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I thought maybe like there was a bias towards certain stores, but I guess that makes the same sense. If you're like, hey, this store is willing to pay X amount for your car, what prevents them from just saying, well, I will just cancel this bid. Yeah. And I'm going to sell you directly, and I'll give you a little bit less, just pay me more. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Someone's got to be making some money here somehow. So, and you know what? We make a very small fee.
Mm-hmm.
It's about, between 1% and 2%, depending on how much volume the dealer does with us, because the dealers subscribe to the service.
Interesting.
So, it's, if you're selling a $30,000 car, it costs $300. That's not a lot of money, for the dealer to factor into what they're doing. And for the consumer, it's currently totally free. So I think I wouldn't want to sell my car any other way.
Yeah. Oh no, for sure. It's such a, like you said, it's such a hassle to do it any other way, especially when you have a lot of humans involved, because everyone loves to say, I like to make deals in person, not when you're trying to sell something at your home. I've never heard someone say, I love Kijiji because they, a random guy shows up at my house, and when they get there, they start haggling me, which is the worst thing. It's like, we agreed on the price, but now you're in my home. Now it's uncomfortable. It's all that stress from it.
Yeah.
So,
and I think one thing I keep talking about selling your car, but we're really a trade-in platform, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the most important part, is that you have this ability. We're the only guys out there that'll give you this ability to mix and match dealerships. Mm-hmm. So, if you're on Auto Trader, you can do this thing called instant cash offer and see what your car is worth. But that's only with one dealer, and that dealer actually has to pay for that feature to show up on Auto Trader, and the wolf is in charge of the hen house again. Mm-hmm. Versus with us, you put up your car, you get that complete transparency, and then pick any car from any dealer, and that's your number. It doesn't change. And you get that tax credit based on that number. So a lot of people don't understand this, but if you're buying a $40,000 car and you have a $30,000 car that you're trading, your current car is worth $30,000 and you go to buy a $40,000 car. When you do that transaction in a dealership, you only pay tax on the $10,000 difference. Mm-hmm. So I'll use Ontario numbers. That's $2,600, right? No, $1,300 on $10,000, 13%. But if you were to do it on, say, you sold your car on Kijiji for $30,000, that's $30,000. When you go to buy the new car from the dealership, you pay $40,000 plus 13% tax.
Oh.
Right? Oh, wow. So now that's like $5,600, whatever the number is. I can't do it in my head because I haven't had enough coffee. So you now have to sell that car on Kijiji for like $35,000 just to break even. So if you're in the market for another car and your car is worth more than, $35,000 reliably, you're better off trading it in 99 times out of 100 because you get that tax credit.
I never knew. That makes a lot of sense with anything, like with gains in general, but it never occurred to me with a car that you're just paying the delta with a trade-in. And I guess that's why trade-ins are obviously seen as so much better if you realize, hey, at the end of the day, I'm saving more money, even though it's not cash in hand. Technically, it's even better.
It is cash in hand, because if you're actually writing a check for it, you're writing a smaller check, right? Yeah. I'm writing $10,000 plus 13%, so I'm writing $11,300 check, versus I went into the dealership. I paid 40 grand for that
Mhm.
car, and that's, let me do this real quickly, $4,600 in
Yeah.
tax. So $4,600, and I sold my car on Kijiji for
Mhm.
$33,000. I'm still out money, right? I didn't
Yeah.
write it. I wrote a check for 10 plus $1,300. Now I'm writing a check for 7 plus $4,600, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
And so obviously with your you've worked within the car world many years, then you decided to kind of, I mean, not decide, but now you're working within tech. Is there any large differences from like, running and managing a team on the, I guess, more classic side versus now? Is there any differences in how you have to approach business that now you're more, I hate to use this word, but like techy, like, you're more the tech field, or is it, business is a business no matter where it is?
A certain amount of business is a business, right? There's certain accounting factors, certain, basics. But I will say, and I was actually having this conversation this morning with a guy, the difference in the pace between a tech company and a standard business is astounding. And I kind of jokingly say it's like dog years.
Mhm.
You're about a 7-to-1 ratio. So what you would get done in 7 months in a regular bricks and mortar business, you get done in a month in tech. So the pace is frantic.
Mhm.
And when we were, anecdotally, when we were looking at hiring a tech lead to help us build this all out, we ran into some amazing talent, and they had all just exited businesses, and this was in, late 2020, early
Mhm.
2021, before we even, as I started writing any
Yeah.
code. And these guys were all like, "Yeah, I'm not working for 2 years." And I was like, "What is with all these people? Like, what? I've been working for 30 years straight. I don't see what they
Yeah.
mean." And now I fully understand where they're coming from, because you work from the second you're up to the second you're asleep almost, and it's go 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 go, and you're delivering new products every 2 weeks, and the pace is huge, and you're trying to gain market share and everything else, and it's tremendously fast. So although the basics are the same, the pace is remarkably different. And I think that pace being so remarkably different, that level of learning
Mhm.
is like, the learning curve is straight up.
Mhm.
And for a first time entrepreneur, I think that a startup pace is probably like, if that's all you know, I'd say it's very different from opening up a flower shop
Yeah.
or a car dealership or a, you know, hot dog stand. I don't, whatever
Mhm.
business you're doing a business, and the two are tremendously different just in terms of the pace. You still need product market fit on anything
Yeah.
that you do, right? You still need consumer adoption. You still need buy-in. You still need financing and all these things, but it's the pace.
Yeah. And that's one thing I think with technology. Not only is the pace of the business a lot quicker, the pace of adopting new technology becomes infinitely more complex because you can have within many industries a new tech that can change the whole industry within a week. We saw, I mean, for better or worse, like the AI, a whole last month, all this AI stuff. And for most businesses, I truly believe it doesn't make that big of a difference. But for some industries, they're like, well, now I don't have a business model. My whole job was to proofread essays. Now a computer can do it for me, and I've just lost everything hypothetically. So I think it's one
Yeah.
of those things where the 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 world is literally your oyster. Someone from England can develop something that if I can Google it, I can use it here. So I think that's one of the challenges as well. Is there, obviously, running a startup is hard. There's a lot of difficulties. Was there anything, through this journey you found easier than you thought it was going to be? Not easy as in it's an easy thing, but maybe wasn't as complex or wasn't as challenging as you intended. And on the reverse side, was there something where you maybe had too much confidence in, and then you realized, oh no, this is a little bit more challenging than I thought?
So I will admit, and so my co-founder is, she's awesome, by the way, but she has a PhD in process engineering, well,
Mhm.
micro electromechanical systems.
Mhm.
So she gets this world. She's been in the startup world before. Um, I This was totally new for me. So I think a few things that were more difficult, I'll start with that one
Mhm.
first, were the fact that your product is going to change so much, and it's like you're building a house that the construction never finishes on. And I think I was, under the impression is, okay, we'll build it, this thing will be ready, and it's gone. And instead, what happened is we built something, and yeah, now we got to go move that bathroom, or we don't even want a bathroom there. You know what? Let's put a kitchen there, or let's just put a bedroom there. Um, and unfortunately, I didn't have that perspective.
Mhm.
So that was a real shocker for me. And then on the other side of the equation, things that were easier was raising money. And
Interesting.
and I don't want to say that flippantly,
Mhm.
but startup capital for this kind of a business versus, say, a dealership, because that's the world
Mhm.
I came from, two very different things.
Hmm.
Because the the possible upside is so great,
Yeah.
because of the way you can scale versus, well, we're going to do this, and in 5 years we're going to be here. So this is your money today, this is your money in 5 years, and this is your risk versus this is your risk, but your potential is just
Yeah.
so exponential. So that part really, really was kind of for me.
Mhm.
But we had a really good story, and we had traction before we even wrote code.
Yeah.
So I think, and we also had experience, right? I had done multiple businesses. My co-founder was well respected, actually, in life sciences. So
Mhm.
there's probably a special place in hell for me because I took her out of life sciences to used cars. So, but we'll deal with that when the day comes.
Mhm.
It's yeah, I'd say those two things.
So one of the most common things is that a lot of successful founders tend to be above 40 in their 50s. That's like the most common millionaires or business that generate millions, although not as sexy as being an 18-year-old who just made $1 billion. That's how life works. You don't really hear about the success stories that took 15 years to make all this money. If you ever talk to successful people, they tend to be older. There's not many 20 year olds walking around with Lambos. With that, what do you think the difference is? Obviously you had a few business throughout your whole life as well, so you've had some experience. What do you think the age brings that I guess young people tend not to realize? I feel when in your 20s you think you know everything, you can take over the world, but there's something lacking there for having success. Is it the people management skills you think take time to learn, or is it the fact that you just have to have knowledge of an industry that is very difficult to learn within a short period of time?
I think if you really want to dumb it down, it's just that life hasn't kicked you in the nuts yet. Uh,
Mhm.
in your 20s, right? Like everything is blue sky and you're just like go, 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 and you're full of energy and there's possibility everywhere, right?
Mhm.
And you don't know what you don't know, which helps you in many ways.
Mhm.
But at the same time, you don't know what you don't know, and it can often screw you. And you
Mhm.
have this kind of feeling of invincibility. And
Mhm.
as you get a little older, life did send you down a road you didn't expect, and then how did you react to that, and how
Yeah.
did you rebuild, and what were the learnings? And then when you come up against something like that again, you know what, we're not going to do it that way this time because that didn't work out very well last time. Instead, we're going to try this approach, or we're going to be more
Mhm.
pragmatic with testing product market fit before
Mhm.
just going all in, for instance. So I think it's just perspective more than
Yeah.
anything.
I think that's the biggest thing is there, especially when I talk to younger founders, it's always that the story of even if they have success, it's like, it was great. I thought I was the smartest person in the room. I was raising all this money. And then I realized I never tested my product. I thought it was great. So everyone else we shouldn't think it was great. And it's always that story of then I realized I had to be humble. I had to drop my ego and realize, okay, I need to test things. I don't know everything. And no one knows everything, especially as fast as we've talked about how fast business can change. And I think it's that perspective that really learns. It's always funny talking to like second time founder and how different their outlook is on life. They're so much more humble typically, and they realize, yeah, this is a challenge and it's going to be a long journey. It's no overnight success.
Yeah,
Wh-
without a doubt.
As and as this business is growing, obviously, like you said, there's so much adaptation, so many different ways to go. How do you know where do you put your focus? Because there's probably 1,000 features or 1,000 different things you can do. Do you have a method for saying like, hey, this is a need to have and something we should focus on? This is just something that really won't add value to the business. How do you differentiate that? Because there's always fires everywhere, it seems.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. We go in and we check and we test And when I say we test the hypothesis before we even do it. We go out
Mhm.
there and we say, okay, you know what, we want to add this feature because we had feedback from this many users that they want this. But this is a big feature to build. This is not just move this button over here.
Yeah.
Um, then we write a business case for it, and we look at it from different angles, from different stakeholders, and sit there and go, no. Or we call more people and say, hey, we're thinking of doing this. What do you think? And when I say people, I mean users.
Mhm.
And really talk to your customer and know your customer. Because, one guy, what he wants may not be the same thing as what another person really needs. They're just more vocal about it. And
Mhm.
you think, oh, yeah, God, we've got to do that. We've got to do that. And then it's really that one kind of isolated use case. So
Yeah.
I would say that's for us been one of the things which saves you a lot of dev time, saves
Mhm.
you a lot of engineering cost, and saves you a lot of sales and marketing headache too to try and push something over the hill that isn't going to work.
Yeah. And there's always a vocal who's vocal versus what is actually needed can be two different, dramatically different things. It's always like that free money approach. It's like, oh, everyone, even when you're hiring employees, everyone wants to get paid more, but you can't pay everyone more. There's other things that are more realistic, or at least better to support or better to focus on. I think that is a challenge. Like I say, even before talking to some early founders, was the idea that your customers always want something, but they may also not understand your business, or sometimes maybe they don't actually really want it. Like everyone thinks like, oh, it'd be perfect if it worked like this, and then you give it to them, and they're like, you know what, I don't really like it, and you're like, well, I just spent months of development time. You said you really wanted this. It's like class going back to every time you try to create a business, your family's always like, this is fantastic, best idea I ever heard. Okay, can you give me some money and I'll give you the product? Well, no, no, in this economy, and there's always excuses. So once they have to pay for a service or a feature, it always changes. All of a sudden, there's other factors, is what it
Yeah.
seems.
And I'm glad you said that because when I said we had those, almost 100 dealers
Mhm.
that said, yeah, we'll use this, we contractually bound them to paying a sign up fee and a monthly subscription fee before we wrote that code. So this wasn't just a, hey, if we build this, you're going to use it. Yeah, sure, get out of my office.
Mhm.
This was a contemplated thing. No, I need your credit card number or I need your
Yeah.
signature here that we'll bill you later. And if it never comes to be, we'll never bill you. And we
Mhm.
actually, the contract had a, if this isn't, if we're not live before 1 year of the date you sign
Mhm.
this, you're not obligated. So it held us to a time metric,
Yeah.
but at the same time, it made sure that we had people that would actually use it
Mhm.
when it was launched.
That is very smart and insightful, because I think like one thing that always comes up, and I mentor a lot of startups, is the fact that there's always a free money question. Like, if I could make your life easier, would you be interested? Everyone's going to say, for sure. If
Yeah,
my life's easier, or I save money on taxes, or I can do this. But then it's okay. Will you pay for it? Well, that's a whole different question. And like you said, having that contract and saying, hey, we are going to charge you once we build this, gets that, first of all, there's that BS is gone. You're having a real business conversation. I think that is also challenging for a lot of people, because you don't want to make it, you never want conversations to be difficult. You always want it to be blue skies and sunshine. And when you talk about money, things always get a little awkward, no matter how good friend, your best friend you're talking to, it always gets weird when you start talking about money. And I think, like you
yeah,
said, saying, hey, there's a contract, you're taking that extra step to confirm you're actually interested, gets your answers so much quicker. And if you have that product market fit.
yeah. And it's a lot more effort to do it,
Yeah.
and it's more awkward, and it's
Yeah.
tough to get people to sign up. Like you're buying vaporware
Yeah.
basically. But if you make if the product is that compelling, and if you offer a, hey, if we're not live by this day, that's on us, not you. Um, then you got real people
Yeah.
that are actually interested versus your family members that tell you it's
Yeah.
the best idea ever.
Yeah. And it's like I said, it's hard to do, but it's the only way to test it. Because once you launch your product, you are going to have to ask for money one day. So you better start
Yep.
early to really
Yep.
know people's intentions. So, as we wrap up here, obviously a lot of growth, a lot of expectations. Kind of what does the future hold, and kind of where do you see the product developing or the business really growing in the next few years? Or a few years is always a long time, and I guess the next year, where do you think a lot of the growth can be done?
So I know I started the original this
Mhm.
conversation with we're going to be in Ontario, specifically in the GTA,
Mhm.
within the coming months.
Mhm.
So geographic expansion, but also expansion of the product itself.
Mhm.
and the functionality. So right now, selling your car is super smooth.
Mhm.
Trading your car requires a lot of hand holding by our team.
Mhm.
So we're just coming out with the interfaces, and we're asking you questions about your lifestyle, and we're asking you questions about what you need a car for, what you use a
Mhm.
car for, not do you want a Toyota or Honda,
Mhm.
and we're not trying to stick things down people's throats. We're trying to be that kind of that product that people go, how did I live without this before?
Mhm.
Man, that was the nicest way to buy a car because I didn't even know this is what I needed. And I'm not a car expert, but this technology just
Mhm.
made me a car expert. And now I'm confident that I'm getting the right car. You still have to test drive a car. Everyone still,
Mhm.
I believe, should test drive a car. To me, that's an integral component because it can tell you that, and I know this firsthand because I've bought the wrong car more than once, um, because I haven't test driven it. It may not speak to you when you get in. It may have a blind spot that doesn't work
Mhm.
for you. It may have something that just is a quirk that you don't like. So by all means, test drive the car. But if you can at least narrow it down on a
Mhm.
system that just is so smooth and makes you go, oh, that was the most relaxed way I've ever bought a car, and your
Yeah.
shoulders just kind of flop down, and you have no stress. To us, that's when we know we've done our job.
Mhm.
And for me, that means product, geography. We're going to be across Canada shortly, as I mentioned, and then into the US. The US market's huge for us. Um,
Interesting.
and that market is absolutely ripe for this sort of thing. I've already have US dealers that have waitlisted with us.
Mhm. Oh wow.
So it's definitely it's a different approach. I don't think it could have happened pre-COVID
Mhm.
because you have this competitive cooperation. All the dealers on the platform agree that, hey, if that's the trade value, that's the trade value of my store or your store or your store or your store. And the way it works is that if I don't want to keep that car as the dealer that's taking the car in
Mhm.
on trade, I just pass it off to the dealer that said he was willing to pay that.
Interesting.
So for the
And
consumer,
yeah.
it's you're dealing with one person. It's easy, it's smooth. You don't
On
have to
point.
go drop your car here and then go over there. There's none of that. It's just, hey, here's my car. Oh, great. My new car is awesome. Let me test drive it. Yeah, it's exactly what I expected. You already know what you're paying. You already know how much your monthly payment is. Everything's done. You bought an extended warranty or you didn't because that was right for you or wasn't.
Mhm.
And away you go.
It's so interesting how, like you said, this idea sounds so simple. Or when you once you build it, you're like, oh, this is such a simple idea, but it's only when you use it you realize, like, wow, how has no one done this before? Like the technology's here and it's been around for a while, but it's like you said, it's the little things that you have to learn. Or working with the industry, you have to realize that working with a dealership as a consumer can be challenging, can be awkward, but working between dealerships, that's what the business model, they're used to it. It's not uncomfortable for them. It's how they have to do business. So I think that's the biggest thing, is finding those inefficiencies and just saying there has to be a better way, and building a solution to do that. So, you know,
Yeah.
thank you so much for chatting. And obviously, I'm excited to see the expansion out east into the bigger cities, and then down south in America, which has always, like you said, always a different beast. It's just talking about technology faster in the States, everything is just literally bigger. You have
Yeah.
10 times the population, and the whole model can be different as well. But very excited to see how the next little while goes. And if people want to follow along and learn more, kind of what's the website and how can people learn more
Yeah,
about the
super
business?
simple. You just go to mintlist.com. So MINT, like the tasty minty toothpaste that you probably used this morning, list.com. And just, it's pretty simple. Trade my car, sell my car. And I'd invite anyone to give it a shot and see what you think. And, tell us what you think. We'll put it in our feedback loop and then work through the noise.